Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting and potentially troubling news that we got for Monster Hunter Rise on the PC. Although the Nintendo Switch version does have a lot to say and what seems to be going on in this very specific situation. And that's the fact that a user named Ryu Kishi went ahead and discovered and did some testing. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for their video originally showcasing this, but essentially it seems to be that monsters, once you unlock the frame rates on the PC version, are starting to act a little bit erratically, where you are simply seeing that they're either hitboxes or their targeting to you, the hunter, as they're trying to hit you, becomes a little bit more accurate and perhaps actually causing the game to become more difficult in a probably non-designed way, where the developers should probably starting to look into this because it seems to be starting to become a problem. Now there is some table setting that needs to be done. First and foremost, we know that the Nintendo Switch version is locked to 30 frames per second, whether it is you're playing in handheld mode or in dock mode. Same thing for the Nintendo Switch Lite and of course the OLED as well. They all run at the same performance profile. The PC version on Steam has the option to be able to run at 30 frames per second, but most people will not be playing it that way. Most likely, most people will be playing it at 60 frames per second, which is, what you would expect for a typical console experience that's not in that handheld format. But things begin to take a weird turn when it comes to you start playing 120 frames per second, 200 frames per second, 244, and then it gives you the option for, I believe it's unlimited or uncapped, which is just however fast your PC can actually run the game, that's how much frames you're going to be able to output. And this is where things begin to take a weird turn, because what this user is starting to showcase here is that there's a weird, distinct time between the monster being able to attack you from 60 frames per second, which is what you would typically get used to, have enough time to be able to evade an attack and get out of the way, and then the monster animation for that same type of attack becoming sped up to the point that it kind of becomes unavoidable to just get out of the way for that very same attack that you could have easily avoided at 60 frames per second. Now they do specifically mention that this is not something that ultimately feels like it breaks the game to the point that it becomes unplayable. You can still avoid attacks, you can dodge out of the way, you can certainly evade if you have extra evade points and stuff like that. That's not really the issue here, but it does seem to showcase something along the lines of monster attacks being specifically tied to frame rates and not specifically just tied to just their normal coherent behavior. There have been games in the past where frame rates being unlocked kind of break the experience. I believe this is something that PlayStation 2 games and Nintendo 64s used to experience very early on in the emulation days, where people were just trying to make these games run at ridiculous frame rates, and they, lo and behold, they find out that these games are kind of tied to a very specific frame rates, and they just kind of break down once you start to run them at faster frame rates. So this is now something that we're seeing on this specific game for whatever reason, that people are starting to wonder why that may be. Now in the video he showcases two specific examples. He's kind of circling Magnamalo, and then there's another set of clips for Rajang. And the first Magnamalo one I think is the pretty clear telling one, where both on the Nintendo Switch and on PC running at 30 frames per second, he's able to just simply dodge the dust attack that he does, and then he does a tail poke kind of directly forward to you, the hunter. Pretty easy to avoid the smoke. You just kind of just run into it because the smoke is moving forward to you, but if you go counterintuitive to it, moving against it, you can just kind of easily avoid it. And then the tail poke itself, you just kind of strafe out of the way, not necessarily all that dangerous. Or if you're already walking diagonally, you should be able to avoid it nonetheless. When he starts to run the game at unlocked frame rates, however, it starts to show that you pretty much not only can you not avoid the smoke, but also that poke will always clip you. And if it clips you, that means you're just going to get sent off flying, you're going to lose health. So then he showcased another clip with Rajang, and the same thing happens with his weird hyper beam attack, where he just kind of just burst out a beam out of his mouth, and yellow lightning I believe is what it is, and it's just you can dodge it easily at 30 frames, get out of the way just by walking. You don't even have to drive or strive or anything along those lines. You can just walk out of the way, and then in an unlocked frame scenario, you end up having a situation where like it's always going to clip you just a little bit, enough to send you flying. So what that says is that there's either some inconsistencies with the way your character is being picked up in engine, some sort of tick ratio situation going on, which would be really weird if that is actually the case. Or a simpler way to explain this would be that the frame rates are actually causing the attacks to be sped up just enough for the monster's attacks to be a little bit faster, meaning that you should be able to avoid these, but for some reason you can't. One of the things that I spoke about very early on in the review process for the PC version, and this was even something that we proved during the demo when the PC version demo dropped, was the fact that because you have higher frame rates, you can telegraph monsters' attacks a little bit easier because you're simply having more frame data being shown, you know, in interlapses between, you know, microseconds. So you're seeing more frame data and you're able to see that monster's paw wind up, you know, like a Zinogre pounce or whatever. You're able to see more information as that wind up begins that tells your brain instantly as you're receiving, you know, that information with your eyes, get the hell out of the way because it's going to do that attack you can recognize and you know where you need to evade it from, whether it is a short distance, a medium distance, or just completely back out of the way until he finishes doing his attack. So all of that is still true in this situation in unlocked frame rates and unlimited frame rates where the game is running at, you know, 300 plus frame rates if your computer can actually handle it. But there's something happening here in the internal engine simply speeding up those same attacks to the point that an attack you know should be easily avoided by simply just walking out of the way becomes a non-option. So you have to evade or dodge or whatever the case may be, Superman dive if you have to, or whatever it may be. And that's just simply not the way it's supposed to be. Frame rates should not be equating more difficulty, but if it simply means that the attacks are tied to the frame rates, it would simply explain why we're seeing what we're seeing. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is going to require a whole heck of a lot more testing. Hopefully not just his video, which again, link in the description below so you can check it out for yourselves, but also this video can help out Echo and get this information out there for other people to start diving into it, and hopefully ultimately reaches Capcom's ears that there might be some issues going on once you start dealing with unlimited and uncapped frame rates on the PC version. Again, this does not mean that the game is broken in any way, shape, or form. It just simply means that perhaps there are some oversights that, you know, perhaps weren't fully tested when you're dealing with unlimited frame rates, that the PC version needs to be looked into to perhaps sort it out. But that's about all the information that I wanted to go over today. I found this extremely interesting and potentially a troubling situation if you are using uncapped frame rates on your PC experience, and ultimately means that you're making the game a little bit more harder for yourself when you probably shouldn't need to, or there's no real reason to. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.